Hello, I'm Nick. Welcome to GEOX, Global Intelligence. Node, if you enjoy unbiased geopolitical and military analysis, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Now, let's get started. Therefore, everything is perfectly clear. Loyal subjects of Putin, turn off your monitors immediately. And never, ever watch. It could be dangerous for your still developing minds. As for everyone else, let's begin today's geopolitical news analysis. Once again, the biggest developments are coming from the Russia-Ukraine front. The most notable story is that Ukraine has carried out its fifth, completely unsuccessful, drone strike against Russian territory. This time, more than 800 unmanned aerial vehicles were reportedly launched. According to Russian reports, not a single one reached its intended target. This is now the fifth consecutive case. That creates a rather curious picture. Earlier, I suggested these drone waves might simply be decoys designed to expose Russian air defense positions. That theory might explain it once, maybe twice, even 3 times. But this is now the 5th time. Ukraine keeps missing the target completely. The successful strikes reported over the past several days have all involved missiles. Something appears to have happened with Ukraine's drone program. What exactly happened? No one knows. It remains a mystery. I'm not going to speculate. Military specialists will eventually figure it out. Still, I find the suddenly increased effectiveness of Russia's air defense systems against drones particularly fascinating. I'll venture one possible explanation. Ukraine's drones may simply be obsolete. In practical terms, they're roughly comparable to the Shahed drones that once targeted Ukraine. But warfare has undergone an entire technological revolution since then. Russia has already moved on to the Geran 3, Geran 4, and Geran 5 variants. They're now jet-powered, use protective coatings, incorporate artificial intelligence, and likely include numerous additional upgraded. Now, let's continue with today's developments on the battlefield. Russian forces continue advancing on several sectors of the front. Ukraine is facing serious difficulties. Russian troops are advancing. Near Sumy, their offensive has now reached wooded terrain. That's significant. Previously, Ukraine managed to halt Russian advances before they entered the vast forests stretching toward the city of Sumy. Now they're inside those forests, with dense summer foliage providing cover. Drones become less effective, while attacking forces find it much easier to move forward unnoticed. So Sumy should be paying close attention. Prepare to welcome us, beautiful Sumy. That's a reference to an old Soviet-era song once sung by Red Army troops during the invasion of Finland. Back then, those invaders were taught a harsh lesson. This time, however, Ukraine's situation appears increasingly difficult. So, Sumy remains under growing pressure. Russian forces continue making daily gains. There is also continued Russian progress near Kharkiv. The forces involved aren't particularly large. Even so, they continue advancing. In some sectors, the gains amount to dozens of kilometers. That has begun raising questions among military observers. What exactly is happening to Ukraine's defensive lines? The recent breakthrough near Byly-Kolodya has allowed Russian troops to reach the outskirts of the settlement far earlier than many analysts expected. Some believed it would take another 2 months. Russia may reach the outskirts of Kharkiv even before it's newly mobilized. Troops complete their training, and once that much larger force becomes operational, Kharkiv would become highly likely if current trends continue. The more important question, however, is this. It appears Ukraine has exhausted much of its reserves during the spring and summer. offensives in the Zaporizhia sector. As a result, it no longer has enough forces to respond effectively to Russian attacks across multiple parts of the front. Another major development is unfolding near Lyman and Kostiantynivka. According to the speaker, Ukraine now controls only small remnants of those areas. Based on available reports, Russian forces have captured most of both cities, so much so that he describes them as being on the verge of complete occupation. Only isolated Ukrainian detachments remain on the outskirts. Meanwhile, the Russian advance continues. The reason, he argues, is the same everywhere. Ukraine's logistics are becoming exhausted. Reserve forces are running short. Beletsky's counterattack near Chandrihal failed to halt the Russian offensive, with supply routes across the Seversky Donets River constantly disrupted by Russian strikes. He argues that Ukrainian command faces a difficult but necessary decision to preserve what remains of the Third Corps. They may have to withdraw behind the Seversky Donets River, of course. There's another option. One can keep making self-destructive decisions simply out of stubbornness. The speaker says that would only benefit the Russian command. Another notable report concerns a Russian breakthrough near Kramatorsk. Russian forces reportedly captured the village of Malinivka. Kramatorsk is now drawing steadily closer to the front. Indirect fire systems are already capable of striking the city's outskirts. If that's the case, there may no longer be a need to complete a full encirclement from both the north and the south. Russian troops will eventually enter Kramatorsk. At the same time, Ivanaev's forces on the southern sector repelled Ukrainian attacks against their right flank and continued pushing westward. According to the speaker, the Ukrainian front is showing signs of strain in several areas. Russian forces are advancing toward the Verkhnya Tasa River. Two settlements have reportedly been captured, with video footage presented as confirmation. The settlements themselves are not the main issue. The key development, he argues, is that Ivanaev's forces are approaching Highway T0408. This road connects the city of Kharkiv with its primary supply route to the north. Another highway links Kharkiv with Zaporizhia to the west. However, because it lies so close to the front, it remains under constant attack from Russian drones and artillery, making regular supply operations extremely difficult. Until now, most logistics relied on Highway T0408 reportedly, within 4 kilometers of the road. Mortar are already capable of reaching it. For all practical purposes, the speaker argues that supply route has ceased to function. The obvious question then becomes, how will Kharkiv continue defending itself? In his view, the city's fate will likely be decided by Ivanaev's offensive. Ironically, he says, it would be interesting if Kharkiv were captured not by Teplinsky's forces, but by Ivanaev advancing from the east. Meanwhile, Teplinsky continues fighting Ukrainian forces near Stepnogorsk. Heavy meeting engagements are still underway there. Despite receiving reinforcements, he has reportedly been unable to stop the Ukrainian advance. At the same time, Russian troops pushed deep behind Ukrainian positions and nearly reached Primorsk on the Konka River before Ukrainian forces drove them back. So, what does it all mean? Russia has fully resumed offensive operations and is once again relying on its preferred strategy: strike at one area to force General Syrski to transfer reserves there, then attack elsewhere. The problem, he said, is that there are practically no such reserves. When units are withdrawn from one sector of the front, Russian troops immediately launch a new offensive in another location. As a result, they continue to advance in one area, then on the other one, then on the third, then on the fourth, then the fifth. In fact, as Putin himself recently stated, Russian troops are now advancing on the entire front. Syrski has no effective way to stop these offensives. Ukraine exhausted most of its reserve forces during the counteroffensive in the Zaporizhia area at the beginning of the campaign. Welcome to reality. This is how I assess the current strategic situation. These battlefield events stand in stark contrast to Ukrainian propaganda claiming constant victories, successful offensives, positions of strength, and predictions that Putin will eventually be forced into peace talks. President Zelensky is no longer interested in negotiations and instead demands that Russia withdraw completely from Ukraine. Under Zelensky's leadership, Ukraine's current course has already been determined.